Hey, welcome to the Mormon Meat Locker. I'm your host, Cable the Party Jenkins, and I've got Caroline Kingsley with me on the line. And it looks like Sariah just jumped on.
I did.
Great. Well, welcome, Sariah. Just to start off, we're going to go over a few housekeeping items. The link that I post in the Facebook group will take you directly to our Google Plus page. If you join from our Google Plus page to watch the live stream, then you get some interactive options, such as the showcase feature, which is where we put some links to different stuff. So usually we'll have a link for whoever our guest is of the week to showcase what they're about. If we have sponsors, the links will be on there. Right now we have a link up that is a link to our Google Plus page. So if you haven't ever joined, if you want to go there, you can add us to your circles, and that's an easy way to do it. The other option we have is a live Q&A that you can access from there. On the live Q&A, feel free to ask any questions you have. They can relate to the guests we're having on that week. They can relate to the topic or anything really to do with mid-singles. And then if you ask a question, we'll see it, and then we will be able to hopefully get to all the questions that are asked. So. And as we grow, we hope to have more live questions so that we can talk about the things that are really on everybody's mind. The other option is to go to our YouTube page, and it live streams there, but there's no interactive options. So if you go there, you'll just be watching, but that is an option, and it, that'll work on your smartphone. You can just pull up your YouTube app and go to our page. If you follow our channel, then it'll be really easy to just get to it that way. So, that being said, we want to welcome Sariah on. Sariah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you are doing and trying to accomplish within the mid-singles?
Okay, so I have been divorced now for going on 7 years almost, and I have, in the process of reintegrating myself back into being single in the single scene, gotten myself very involved, because I think that there's value added by having those connections that you make by knowing other people in your same situation. And so over the course of the years, it's just become my passion to help singles to connect, to figure out how to navigate this new modern dating world, because it's very different than when a lot of us first entered it. And it also changes if you've been in it this whole time and never been married. And so I do everything I can around singles. I started midsinglestoday.com, which is a blog spot for mid-singles where they can talk about the things that are important to them and discuss the issues that involve them.
Awesome. It's, I think it's important to have a lot of people out there doing things and making things happen. It gives us a lot of different options and a lot of things to do. What are you working on right now? Do you have an event coming up in February, right?
Yeah, so I have a couple of events as far as for singles. Last week you talked to Jonathan and Marco. I'm also helping out with the Singles Gala for care cuts. So that's coming up November 14th. Super excited about that. That's a chance to help the homeless and also to do something with singles for us to connect. And then I have an event in February, the 12th to the 15th, called Frost Yourself, and we'll go up to Island Park, Idaho, and do some snowmobiling and have a chance to really get to know each other in a setting where you remove yourself from your day-to-day and you're able to really connect to people in a way that isn't necessarily possible when you're around home and doing your normal stuff.
I did the Island Park Summer Retreat, and I think that was one of my favorite retreats I did. Really great area. So
okay. Glad you liked it.
I mean, yeah.
It's where during that one I saw the snowmobile signs while we were ATVing, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. So really excited about it. Some of the other things that I've been looking into is how can we actually help each other as far as we do a lot of events, we have different activities, but what can we do to truly help us connect as a group and then also one-on-one? And so I've been doing a lot of research on the effects of dopamine and oxytocin in our dating life and how that affects us, and how we can heal after heartbreak through dopamine and oxytocin. And one of the things that I do with my events is I focus on activities that help us to produce oxytocin, which I can get into later on. But it's the bonding chemical. It's called the love hormone. It's the morality hormone, are all the different things that it's been coined. But creating events around the activities that produce oxytocin, which is necessary for real bonding and connection to happen between human beings.
Great. I think that's such an interesting angle to look at, because I've never thought about dating in terms of the chemicals in the brain. And I think if we could understand a little bit more of what's actually happening in our heads, you know, and on that level, it can really help us to guide a little bit better our dating decisions.
Exactly. So one of the things that a lot of people look at when they're trying to date, because this is like the undating advice, right? This advice isn't going to help you get more dates. This advice is going to help you better understand your dating world. So the typical dating advice, I'm sure you guys have heard it. It tells you to, wait so long to text, and it tells you to not be the first one to be emotionally available. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard plenty of that, right? And that advice does work to get people to chase you, to get people to ask you out. You're going to get more dates. It absolutely works. It will work. But it's manipulating dopamine. And so dopamine is the chemical that is produced through external acceptance. Dopamine is a chemical within our brain that is produced with almost every addiction. They're finding more and more that your addiction to porn is largely connected to an addiction to dopamine. Food addictions is an addiction to dopamine. All different kinds of addictions are dopamine. It's produced through social media. It will produce dopamine. Dopamine lasts about 20 minutes. And it is extremely motivational for people. It is a huge drive. Dopamine is what is produced when you flirt. So I'm not saying it's bad. It's a good thing. It makes you feel good. It's a little shot. And that's one reason why things like online dating, social media, all these different interactions are so prevalent in society now, is because every time you get on, you get a little shot of this dopamine that makes you feel good. It's all the things that promote your outside external self. And so it is important, and it's what motivates you to flirt. So dopamine is the chemical that will get you to take action. And so it's very prevalent in our dating. However, it's very easy to be a counterfeit to oxytocin, which is the actual bonding chemical. If you've ever heard of Simon Sinek, he's one of my favorite, and he talks a lot about dopamine and how we're a dopamine addicted society, and he talks about how dopamine is connected to so many of the ills in our society, and it's a counterfeit to true human connection. And so as far as dating, I think a lot of the dating advice that is out there, it absolutely can work. However, what it produces is it's just continuing to feed dopamine. And the moment that you're no longer feeding somebody's dopamine fix, the moment that you don't follow that advice, like you've heard of the book, Why Men Marry Witches, I'm not going to say the word, and it also says Why Men Love Witches. So the first book, Why Men Love Witches, definitely talks about all the things that are needed in order to manipulate somebody's addiction to that dopamine. The second follow-on book came about, and it explains that even once you have your partner within your grasp, your victim, as they often, in a lot of those dating books, it actually talks about your partner as your victim. It talks about continuing this manipulation, that even after you're married, you have to still continue the chase. You still have to continue to have them get just enough, but still want more. That is all a manipulation of the dopamine that's created through the flirting, through the anxiety that's caused through waiting for somebody to text back, not knowing how they truly feel. That produces dopamine releases in your brain. So whenever you hear somebody say, like, Like the beginning of love. Like, how do you guys feel when you're first feeling love? What do you like? What are some of the things that you guys hear people say helps them to know that they're in love? Or like the very beginning.
I would say you're thinking about them all the time. Any conversation not involving their name or about them, just seems wasted, right? You're waiting for them to text. If they don't text, you're, beside yourself. I don't know, Cable?
Yeah, just having them on your brain pretty much 24/7. When you're not with them, you're thinking about them. That's
a high too, right? That's in a way one of the coolest parts of a relationship is obviously you want it to get more in depth at some point, but it is a really cool feeling right at the beginning when you're just Twitter pated all the time.
Right. So there's a train of thought out there that the initial feelings of love or that initial attraction, right? There's a huge conversation amongst the dating experts and through different people that are involved in the dating scene or love, what it is. There's this discussion of is that initial stage of the butterflies, is that just anxiety? Is that
a little bit probably
love? Is that lust? Right? So what is that? And so more and more we're through the research of like Paul Zak, he's the leading expert on oxytocin right now, and the effects of it and dopamine and all the things around it. So some of the research right now is showing that feeling is literally your addiction that you are creating for the chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, and some of the other endorphins that are produced when you're initiating a relationship. And so that saying, I've lost that loving feeling, right? Like I just had it, but I don't have it anymore. I just don't feel that anymore. That I don't feel that anymore is often can be that they're not feeling those chemicals in large abundance that they were originally feeling. That by following the typical dating game techniques, you're actually falsely producing dopamine in the other person, and that addictive feeling is wanting to get more of that dopamine.
Like you talk about with it being an addiction, you're chasing that initial high. If you're always chasing that feeling you had at the beginning, that's probably why you get into the cycles of just breaking up and just going after new people, because that's what gives you the high. You lose that high and you get something a lot more deeper and profound. But yeah, if you're going and chasing that high. And just real quick, I think it's not dealing with the chemicals as much, but one of my issues with the way some of those books where they're saying, wait for him to call you, and you got to play hard to get, and X, Y, Z, and maybe this is my reasoning because I'm terrible at doing this thing. If I like someone, I'm pretty open with it. Maybe that's being single. But I feel like if you are starting in a place where you're not being genuine about your feelings, then how are you really going to develop a solid and trusting and very genuine relationship where you're just being really open and communicative with each other? If you're starting off in a place where you're not really communicating because you're playing by some rule where, well, he hasn't called me, or you're a guy and you're waiting 3 days to call her. Like, if you're thinking about someone, just text them or whatever, let them know. I feel like if we're just more open with each other, then we stop playing some of these games, this is going to bode better for the relationship down the road and your communication with each other.
No, I agree completely. So by looking into oxytocin and dopamine, I call them dopamine daters. And now in my own life, I look for the signs that somebody is addicted to dopamine, that they are dopamine dating me. That, the dopamine date is the date where you go and you do a quick lunch, you do the drive-by, you meet them here, you do this and that. They're dating 5 other people at the same time, and they're letting you know they're dating 5 other people at the same time. That creates anxiety. That creates that sense of like, oh man, like the initial is I want them to approve of me as well. I want them to want me, and it's manufactured. And one of the reasons why I got into this is because I used to be a serial monogamist. I used to date multiple guys at one time. I, was playing by all of the rules that are given, and I don't necessarily think that I was doing it on purpose and manipulating. It was just happening. I wasn't really focused on my dating. And what ended up happening is a series of heartbreaks, where as long as I was unavailable to that man, then he would chase me. He would offer me the world. But the moment that I actually was like, okay, I'm going to actually try and give in this relationship, I'm going to actually be a part of it, the moment that would happen, then they'd be like, oh, I just lost that feeling. And they wouldn't be able to tell me any reason why. They'd be like, Sariah, this worst phrase in the world, Sariah, you are amazing. I absolutely love you, but I just don't have that feeling anymore. Like, I have love for you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And so that has just become one of the, like, just motivations behind me figuring out what does that come from? What is that? And I think I've come to understand that that was because so much so that they were addicted to that dopamine. The worst feeling in the world is when, this happened to me, 6 days before your wedding day, your fiance lets you know that they are absolutely addicted to you, and that scares them, and that they've lost control, and that they don't understand why they feel so compelled in that direction, like towards marriage. And that's one of the reasons why understanding dopamine and what that effect has on people is so important to me, because I'm in a place now where I don't want somebody to be addicted to me. I don't want to create that feeling of anxiety if they don't hear back from me that they feel. I want it to be more genuine, and that's where oxytocin comes into play. So if you, like I said before, Simon Sinek has a great talk about dopamine and the dopamine generation, and the answer to the dopamine generation is oxytocin. If you've been paying attention lately, there's been some new research and a new theory out there that the answer to addiction is not sobriety. The answer to addiction is connection, human connection. We're social beings. And so oxytocin, what it does is it creates social memory within our brain, either for positive or for negative. And so I think the answer to our modern dating dilemma of like bouncing from one person to the other, like you said, like if as soon as you start to create actual connection with somebody without reason, they're on to the next person because they're looking for that dopamine, and that's a part of external affirmation and external acceptance. Oxytocin is more of an internal chemical, and it has a lasting effect. So oxytocin lasts for 4 hours. Oxytocin is most highly produced during birth and then also during sex. So a lot of times people think that this is a chemical that is related mostly to females, because that's why women bond more during intercourse than men, is because they're producing higher levels of oxytocin. But it's produced on a daily basis through normal interactions that are like, so Cable, do you remember when we did at Huntington Beach, the free hugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little before, but what kind of were the feelings you had after we did those hugs? Like, what were some of the things that you noticed in yourself and in others?
People were just more open and more easier to talk to after hugging them.
Yeah, so a hug, a 4-second hug will produce 4 hours worth of oxytocin. And it is kind of said that you should get 8 hugs a day because you'll have that oxytocin stream. And oxytocin is, I think, what we need to add more into our modern dating. And the way you can add that is the kind of dates that you have and the kinds of things that you talk about. Oxytocin is produced when you trust another individual. And so vulnerability is huge in dating, because if you aren't vulnerable in front of the other person, then they won't be able to produce the oxytocin that's needed in order to bond to you. There's a dark side to oxytocin, and that's that because it creates social memories. If you have oxytocin with an individual and that individual ends up hurting you, oxytocin that can then be associated with that stress factor, which is love. And so I think a lot of times, especially in our population that's a little bit older, that's had heartbreak, that's gone through divorce, that's gone through all of that, when we do start to actually feel oxytocin, that dark side effect kicks in, and oxytocin production actually makes us want to run because it creates the fear and reminds us of our past experiences. And so one of the reasons why I think understanding dopamine and oxytocin and how it interacts with our dating life is being able to look at it, bring it from the subconscious to the conscious, so that we're able to analyze it and ask ourselves, am I only chasing this person because I want the dopamine? Am I running away from this person because I'm actually connecting to them? And not looking at our techniques, but taking a closer look at our chemicals that are affecting our love life.
I love that. I think that's such a great way to look at it in different light than I ever have before. I love the hugging thing too. Now I have scientific evidence to back up my hugging of everyone.
Exactly. We should hug everybody, especially singles. We need lots of it because
all
loneliness is caused when we don't have oxytocin. We're missing it. That's what loneliness is. That's why a hug will fix it.
Let me think about it.
Yep.
So
we're wrapping up on our time, but I know that you have, you talked about the Frost Yourself coming up, and I think you have a discount to provide our listeners.
absolutely. So all of those that contact me within the next week, 1 week, and mention the Meat Locker, I'll give them $50 off of the price for the Frost Yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, so come and experience it and see and learn more about the activities that you can do with others to actually produce oxytocin.
Perfect. I love it.
Thanks
all right.
so much,
guys. For coming on our show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.